Okay. Okay, we're a minute to noon. Can everyone hear me? The participants? You can't hear me, Jess. Okay. Okay, I'm getting yeses. Thank you. Okay, cool. All right, and thank you. Okay, and now it's noon, so welcome to Behind the Lens. This is a virtual program the Museum of Contemporary Photography has been holding since, since the lockdown in March. So we host different photographers and they take us into a sort of virtual studio visit and talk about their work. I'm Dalina Perdomo Alvarez, currently curatorial fellow for diversity in the arts at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. And I've curated the show Temporal, Puerto Rican Resistance, which is up now until September 19th. Here it is. And today I'm here with Erika P. Rodríguez, who is an exhibiting artist in the show. The show includes her work on Hurricane Maria and the protests in Puerto Rico, particularly the Renuncia protests from summer of 2019. And she will be discussing that, but also more of her work, not limited to the hurricane and the protest. And then just a bit about Erika. She is a documentary photographer from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and her photography explores topics of community, identity, and countering the stereotypical representation of the Caribbean. And her work has appeared in the New York Times, CNN, the Washington Post, Bloomberg, NPR, Smithsonian Magazine, among others. So she will be presenting for us today. You can use the chat to ask questions. Feel free to type in questions throughout, but we will have, we will leave 10, 15 minutes at the end. We're all sort of come back in. I'm gonna turn off my screen now so Erika can have the whole focus, but then I'll come back at the end to read the questions out loud for Erika. So definitely feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, I would actually like, if people have questions, you can totally interrupt me and have it more of a conversation than just like the Q&A at the end. You know, if there's any questions that happen throughout, interrupt me and we can just talk about it. So
let me know
I prefer that, you know, and then at the end we can just go over the conversations that we have. But let's plan on doing that. So people are feel free to, like, you know, join in the conversation more than just like listen to me talk here.
Yeah, if you see like chat questions popping up and you want to say like, oh, let's take a break for questions, I can like turn my screen back on and read them out loud. So for you, if you prefer, or if you prefer to read them, you can do that as well. But at the end, I'll come back in as to do a formal Q&A. But yeah, everyone feel free to feel like you're in a studio visit with Erika and ask questions or make comments. Okay, so I guess I'll disappear for.
Okay, thank you, Alina, and thank you for having me. It's gonna feel a little bit of like a monologue, but let's do this. And okay, here we go. Can you allow me to share my screen? There. Here we go. So we try to do the captions. Let's see if those work. So I'm gonna introduce, thank you for the introduction, Dalina. And yes, so I'm a freelance photographer based in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I've been here working full-time as a freelance photographer and photojournalist for the past 5 years. And I grew up in Puerto Rico. I spent 6 years in California, where I studied photography and worked a little bit at the LA Times. And 2015, I decided to move to Puerto Rico and, you know, pursue my career as a photographer here, telling the stories of the place that is home. So first, I'm gonna share some photos from my personal project called The Oldest Colony that I've been photographing for about 7 years. Pretty much everything fits into this. Then I'm gonna show some from Hurricane Maria, then Ricky Renuncia, and a little bit at the end from the earthquakes of earlier this year. So this actually is one of the frames that began the project of The Oldest Colony, and it's a long-term project that I've been doing for about 7 years. It started while I was doing an internship at the local newspaper El Nuevo Dia in Puerto Rico, and the project is a meditation on the Puerto Rican identity to the framework of our colonial relationship with the United States. And I'm always in the photos searching for that like underlying mild tension that for me expresses our political limbo and political identity crisis as a unincorporated territory of the United States. I began to cover this, you know, to make these images as a process to understand my own experience as a Puerto Rican and as a Puerto Rican photographer. Like, what did it mean to like photograph Puerto Rico and turn the camera to a little bit to myself, even if I wasn't photographing me. I was like trying to search for something that was within an internal struggle. And the work has built into a documentation of like everyday life and protests and politics and the economic crisis and disasters, and a lot of assignment work too that I've done that actually fits into this project. I think that, you know, like we have a very strong cultural identity. You know, Puerto Rico has a strong cultural identity, and our cultural production, you know, it's that place where we reaffirm and strengthen exactly that we are Puerto Rican, and that's part of inherent to us, not just because of the island that we exist in, but because of the framework and all the complexity of how Puerto Rico exists politically. So like no Puerto Rican doubts he's Puerto Rican, but if we go into being American or not, it's a longer conversation, and it can, you know, bring up a ton of emotions and have people fight. And it's part of like, I think a little bit of the madness of being Puerto Rican, that any Puerto Rican can tell you we all have. So we're comparing our cultural identity to our political identity, which is completely different, right? And that's the reason for this project, because, you know, we exist under the discretion of Congress, and they hold all authority over us. You know, we had the fiscal board imposed in 2016 that oversees all the public spending of the government. Right now we have no idea how long it will be. They still haven't been able to create a 1 year of balanced budget. So it might be in for a long time. And it's really starting to affect a lot of people, and the economic crisis just keeps worsening with natural disasters and now the pandemic. I wanted to say that if there's any questions about specific images, let me see if I can pop up I actually don't think I can pop up the chat while doing screen share, Dalina. So if you, let me see. Can I? No.
I can, if something comes in, I can let you know. Like,
okay, yeah, I just wanted to say, I was gonna try, but I don't think it's, can you see the full screen, or are you, wait, sorry guys. I'm trying. There we go.
I can see the full screen, and I can also see the chat. So if
Okay,
anything
awesome.
pops up, I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Yeah, so all of these images are from like different years. I'm sorry, they're not that I've started in 2012, and I like, you know, continued on. This was part of an assignment in one school, and when in the first wave of closures from public schools in 2017, so the year of the hurricane, but before. And we went into a school that was gonna have receive a ton of students from like 2 closing schools that were nearby. And when I made this image, I didn't really like pay attention to the zeros in the middle of the multiplication that the girl was doing. And for me, it just, you know, was that other layer that I honestly was not paying attention. I was more paying attention to her. But afterwards, it really caught my attention to, like, you know, it's like little things that can like hint into our reality, even if it's not like literal. As a photographer, I think I struggle, and I think it's part of, I mean, maybe any Puerto Rican that identifies itself as a, you know, colonized land, that it's a process for me to, through photography, to like decolonize the way I see myself and how I see Puerto Rico, and that's something that I'm learning, and I learned through photographing, and I learn, and maybe I'll continue to learn till the day I die. And because I'm always trying to like question myself, how do we create and construct the identity of Puerto Rico, and what that visual is, like what are the visuals that get pushed out right into either media or books or stories of who Puerto Rico is. And I think one of the, I mean, covering for the news and international news and national in the United States, I think I've always very consciously tried my best to try to break from the narrative that too long or too often is put on us, that we Puerto Ricans are inferiors and lazy and beggars and violent and corrupt and, above anything else, unable to govern ourselves. So I'm not going to deny that Puerto Rico has many issues internally, but there's I think there's a job that we also need to do in countering those narratives, because they're stereotypical, and they're not real, and they're not honest about the lives of Puerto Ricans.
Oh, I had a question myself. I was wondering if you could tell people about why the kid was holding a rooster.
Oh yeah, this is a family in Utuado. And this was photographed for a story for NPR about the ban of cockfighting. So cockfighting was banned last year by the federal government in Puerto Rico. It was banned everywhere else in the United States, but not in its territories. And then they passed an amendment in late 2019 to ban cockfighting in all the territories. That said, none of the territories have any voting power on Congress. So it was a law that affected them, but they had no say. They could speak, but they had no actual power to make any influence or decision into this. So this is a family who sustain themselves from cockfighting. They raise the animals and train them, and in the back of the house they had probably about 200, and it was like a family thing. Jose Papo Torres, which is the man in the middle of the picture, he's the one that like is in charge of everything, and then his wife helps him whenever she can, and the kids are involved whenever they're not in school. They're involved. They also have their own animals. They have some of the chicks that are like smaller, so they grown up in this culture of cockfighting, and that's why he's holding, that's like his favorite animal out of all the ones. I think it was his own, and he was very proud of it. So this is one of the photos that I did for that story. And I mean, this photo, it's very old. It's probably one of the first ones I did. And I still keep it. And I had, when I was starting and doing more portfolio reviews, I think most people told me to take it out because of different reasons. I've always kept it. I'm not gonna say it's like the best image out there, but it just holds a deep meaning for me. There's something about that separation in the frame of families. And you know, at that time I wasn't living in Puerto Rico. I was in California, and I knew that the migration was a serious deal. It was still not being reported in numbers. You know, the brain drain and the massive migration was still not being reported, but I could see it with my friends and family and people I knew, that everybody was leaving. And so this project, it's in the means of being a book. I'm super excited and scared, to be honest, because I've never done this. But I'm really excited to work on something for us to look at. I think early on I decided that my audience was mainly Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans, because we don't have a big culture of photo books that are documentary style, that, you know, show us a daily life of Puerto Rico and how things look like, you know, now. And what does that visual language and narrative say about the times that we're living? So I'm gonna jump into some of the stuff from Hurricane Maria. This was my first hurricane season. I had never covered a hurricane until 2017. That I covered Hurricane Irma in Puerto Rico, and then in the Virgin Islands, US and British. And then a few days later, we had announced that Hurricane Maria was gonna hit Puerto Rico directly. And nobody had an idea of you know, what was to come. This was actually done the day after the hurricane, but I was actually able to get out of the area where I spent the hurricane. Was in Guaynabo, in the newsroom of Nuevo Dia, and we were stuck in there because there was no way on how to get out because of flooding. And this is in Puerta de Tierra, so this is an abandoned building. But for me, the graffiti behind it, it just evoked this summary of so many things that we live with, you know, with the closure of schools and the constant fight that people have to survive. This is in the middle of the island in Patillas area. It was done maybe a week and a half after the hurricane. This photo was taken in Toa Baja, where it flooded. As you can see, the water went up all the way to the door, and the community was deeply, deeply affected. This image was in Utuado. This is actually a street or a road that was almost washed out by a landslide. And I was with a colleague, actually with Chris Gregory, who presented a few weeks ago, and we found a family. So the girl in the photo was part of the family, and their home had pretty much collapsed downhill. And they were able to get out in the middle of the hurricane with the winds, and they had to like drag the grandma through the middle of the street because the house was starting to collapse after rocks and the dirt came down, and they were able to find shelter in a abandoned home that was a little further up the road. And this was in the very beginning, before anybody knew what was to come with the deaths of, from related to the hurricane. This was in the south of the island, and he actually had died on the night, like during the hurricane. And the mother had driven to the hospital in the middle of the hurricane after she received a call saying that her son was dying. He was in his 30s, and this was one of the few funeral homes that were open in the area, and the funeral home had also had damages. So the owners of the funeral home live in the second floor of the building, and they also were affected, and they're they had water come in, and they had lost some of their things too. For me, like, photographing Maria was very personal, because it's like I was covering it for news, but the truth is, like, it was not something that I was gonna like I couldn't photograph it from the outside, because it was also something that I was living and going through. Like, the apartment that I lived in was severely damaged in the hurricane, so I was going to work and then coming home to an apartment that didn't have halfway, like, doors to the balcony, because they had like flown away with the hurricane. And I was like going through it as I was documenting it. So I think there was a layer of like understanding the situation a bit deeper in a way. I don't just because I was also going through it. I think there was like this happened quite a few times where people, like, since I work mostly with reporters that are not from Puerto Rico, you would arrive in a community or to a family that you were talking to.
Sorry. Did it freeze up for everyone?
Trauma that was happening.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Are you, did everyone hear that? Or was it just me?
Did it stop? Sorry.
Yeah, for a second. I was about to be like, oh, did the power go out?
No.
Okay, yeah, it froze. Oh, hi, Paul. Okay, yeah, only that part. I think after you said you work with reporters not from Puerto Rico. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
I thought for a second that the power had gone out, because when we did a tech check, Erika and I were like, okay, so what's the plan because she's in Puerto Rico right now, and that's like just the reality.
Yeah.
So if it happens, you'll probably see me like, oh wait, is everyone here? Like, just in case, because I'm like anticipating like
it will be okay. It will be okay.
The power going out.
I have some faith. Okay.
You can keep going now.
Yeah, no worries. So what was I saying? So that there was this like entire unspoken conversation that happened when like me and the person I was photographing and that was like working with would understand that I lived here and that I lived through the hurricane, that I was also affected. It was just a different, I'm not going to say that it makes it better or worse. It's just like a different way to connect to people, because we understood all the trauma and the pain and the loss that had come with this hurricane, and that every single person had to endure across the entire island. One of the things that I did during the hurricane, when I was staying in the newsroom in Nuevo Dia for about a week and a half, since, you know, they weren't delivering the newspaper, the printed newspaper, and there was like no internet for anybody to connect to and get the news. One of the things that we were asked to do, and since I was like going out to photograph and document, was to take the printed newspapers and pretty much deliver them. So that I would stack up my passenger seat and floor with printed newspapers, and everywhere I stopped and I saw someone, I would like give them a paper, because nobody really knew, like there were no news. There was like one radio station working. So it's something that I like remember. I actually, in my family's hometown in Calle, I went to make some photos, and I got out in a hielera, where, how do you say that, where you go buy ice. And I made some photos, and then after I left, I just kind of returned and gave the people newspapers, and I was like, here you go. And because everybody kept asking me like, why hasn't anybody arrived? This was maybe 4 days after the hurricane. Why hasn't anybody come to help us? What's happening? And I would be like, you know, this is like throughout the entire island, everybody's being affected. And when I gave them the newspaper, I remember that day was the day where they printed, Teresa Canino had gone on a helicopter, and who's a local photographer for Nuevo Dia, had documented in aerial photos the state of how the island was. And it was actually, you know, it was very shocking, those first images. And I remember when I gave out the newspapers, people were just like like everybody was surrounding, just looking at the images like, oh my God, look at this, right? Like everybody was still in shock, because we were all still kind of discovering the extent of the damage. This is actually, do you want to say it? Go for it.
Someone says that hielera is translated ice plant.
Ice plant, thank you.
Yo no sabía eso. Also, I think you might have to turn your captions on again on Google Slides.
Oh, sorry. I think there we go.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. So, sorry, give me 1 second. So I wanted to talk about this image. This is a story I did for the New York Times. It was 11 months after the hurricane, so August of 2018. And we were trying to find, like PREPA, so the Power Electric Authority of Puerto Rico was saying that they just had like 1 or 2 houses left, and that they were going to connect everybody to the electric grid. But they were not actually giving us the information. We were trying to like figure out where it was, but the company was really not letting us know, giving us information to where this family or where this area was. But we did hear that that it was in this town in Ponce, and this is Jasmine Mejias, and her son, one of her sons, she has a younger girl and an older son. And we found the family kind of pretty much by luck, like in journalism, sometimes you just run into luck. We knew it was in Ponce, and we asked around, and they told us the area and the neighborhood that it was in. And the first person we asked that we stopped pretty much like driving on a road in a car that was coming by was a community leader. So he knew where she was. So he was just like, oh, no worries, I'll take you. I know the house. So we ended up at her house, and the family like opened the doors to us, and Frances Robles, who's a reporter for the New York Times, and we spent some time with them. And then I asked my editor at the New York Times if there was interest, that I would love to go and spend the night with them and spend time, you know, like in that process of those last nights without power. They also did not have water service, and wait until they got the power back. So document that process. And this photo is actually in the morning. So I spent the night in their house. This was in Ponce, but like way up in the mountains, almost Jayuya. And this was the first day of school, and they're signing papers that he has to take to school. And he had also changed schools because it was after the closure of schools. So there was like multiple layers of the things that have been happening in Puerto Rico. This is the family of Natalio, who passed away in January after the hurricane, after his apnea machine, his breathing machine for the sleep apnea, I'm sorry, turned off because the generator ran out of gas, and he died at his house. And I covered this story with John Sutter for CNN. This was his grave. This was in Maunabo in the south, and the cemetery was dozens of tombs like this that were pretty much just like makeshift into like making it quick and just writing it on top of the concrete, because there was having so many deaths, and they couldn't like keep up with doing a formal tomb like how it's customary to do them here. I'm gonna go through the ones from Ricky Renuncia. So it's, you know, coverage from the 12 days of protests that ended up in the ousting of Ricardo Rosselló. This photograph was actually taken in his last public press conference. And I made way too many images because I was trying to get it to look like an official portrait, but he was just standing as someone else was on the podium speaking about, you know, the protest and that had happened and the riots that had happened the days before.
Oh, someone has a question?
Yeah.
If you want me to read now?
Please.
Someone's asking, are there issues using or publishing your own photos, copyright and ownership, when they are from news projects like CNN or the New York Times? Oh, and this is something I've asked you before, actually.
Like, are there issues, like, I don't quite...
Like, if, like, of using or publishing your own photos when they are from news projects like CNN or the New York Times. Like I guess a good example would be that I asked you something about the copyright in New York Times, and you have shared copyright.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Some of the photos that you showed from the New York Times, I included in the show, in the exhibition. So
yeah, so it really depends on the client, on the contract. It's different with every publication. With the New York Times is shared copyright, so I can use my work. I own my work, so I can use it without any problem. Some other publications, it really depends. The embargoes are longer, which means that I can't publish them anywhere else for a longer period of time, or sometimes they just keep the copyright. That's what I try to avoid the most. I want to own my work. This was actually after this was during the first like protest against Wanda Vasquez. It was before she took power, but it was when she was like the next person in line. There was a protest in front of the Department of Justice in Atorrey. this is when she signed, when Wanda Vázquez Garcet became governor. And I actually wanted to say something about Ricky Renuncia, that so this was the night that he ended up quitting. And the photo on the left is how full the street was during the Perreo Combativo gathering, and protest. And then on the right, you have a group of guys listening to the message that the governor used to quit, that was posted on Facebook. So I wanted to say that when that happened, I was outside on the street, and everybody was like telling each other to shut up so they could actually like listen to what was being said on the message. And I remember some people even like screaming, just like, why wouldn't he just like say it quickly, you know, because he did quite a long message. And then, you know, when he said that he would quit on August, I think 2nd or 3rd, you know, the street just broke into celebration. And I remember just standing there, and I couldn't even photograph. I was just like in so much shock, because I didn't think that he was going to quit, to be honest, that night. And I don't think I made any justice to document the moment that I had in front of me, because I think I was a bit in shock, because I was not expecting, you know, to have a governor ousted by protest in this island. And then some of these photos are part of the coverage of the earthquakes that happened in January 6th, and the 5.8 earthquake, and then the 6.4 and January 7, and all the aftershocks that came after that. There were about 3,000 smaller earthquakes and not so small since December 28th forward. It's still moving now. There's still earthquakes happening in the south of the island. This was in a shelter, actually the first night. So this was on Three Kings Day on January 6th. The people had moved to take in shelter. This is in Guanica. In a coliseum. And then the next day, after the stronger one that happened on January 7, when I went in, many of the light bulbs from the location had broken down and had actually like fallen on some of the people. I don't think it injured anybody, but after that, then everybody had just like moved to camp outside in an open area. This is a boy in a family. There was actually like 4 families that were camping next to one of the main roads in Guanica. This was a few days, maybe 3 or 4 days after the main earthquake. And I just loved the moment. I waited for, you know, like things to align a little bit, as he was just like, you know, involved in watching his cartoons and, you know, hanging in a hammock in the side of the road while his parents, you know, worried about where they were going to sleep. Everybody was actually like spending the night on chairs, and only the kids were sleeping in mattresses. So all the people in these photographs were staying there, and the people that you see on the right were spending the nights sitting on plastic chairs. And I think that's it. That's, I think, the last one. I would love to talk. I feel it's so weird to do it without having like a conversation or like looking at people's faces.
Yeah, we have a question actually that we just got. So yeah, and we have like 20-ish minutes left. So the rest of it can be a conversation if people want to use the chat or the Q&A. It seems like the Q&A is working, so you can use either one, because I'll read it out loud anyway. So
do you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Oh no, I think you can keep sharing if you're fine with me reading it out loud to you. I don't know if you can see it, because then that way if you want to point to a photo, you have it ready.
Oh, perfect.
So Mariela says, you talked about shifting the narrative around Puerto Rican identity and experience as part of your work's purpose. And I was wondering if you have any anecdotes of moments when you were faced with resistance, backlash, or even just confusion from a publisher or client because they had a different expectation from your work or the Puerto Rican imagery you brought. Mucho cariño para ti siempre, amiga querida.
Honestly, not that I can think of that anybody, any editor would like directly say anything. I think I've always been very vocal, even, you know, before I started freelancing full time, about like not trying to, you know, do those images of like the helpless Puerto Ricans and the cliches of like the paradise and, you know, the coconuts and all of that iconography that it's so stereotypical and that simplifies the reality of, you know, like Puerto Ricans and our stories. I not that I can think of, but I have seen it, and I do see, I mean not every publication, but I do know that some publications lean more towards that, and it's something I see, you know, if I have some specific images that I know are a bit more traditional in the sense of like what would show Puerto Rico being like, that they would use those images instead of the others, you know. But I try, what I try to do is not do them. And then I've had this conversation before with other photographers in another panel that I was in a few years ago about the images that I didn't make. There were a lot of photos that I didn't make during the hurricane because I knew that they, and you know, this is something that it's a complete discussion over the photojournalism world, just because it's like, that's a truth because it's in front of you. But I think we hold more responsibility than that, than just like snapping an image because it's in front of you and make that the truth, than, you know, like taking our camera with responsibility on how we represent people, and especially in like moments where people are super vulnerable, and are, you know, at their, you know, like during a disaster. So I can't think of specific images, to be honest, but I know there were moments that I was just like, I'm not gonna make that photo, just because I know it just feeds into the stereotypical narrative, and I don't want to like make my work be that. I'm trying not to. I'm not gonna say that I've never done it. Probably, I'm still, you know, trying to work on that, but I'm not perfect. But yeah, I don't know if I made sense, but that's my little rant.
Okay, so from the chat, someone from earlier said thank you. It sounds like photographers really need to look carefully at the contracts and copyrights regarding the question you had earlier. And then we have a couple questions. Okay, so I'm gonna read. How do you distinguish between hurricane suffering in colonized Puerto Rico and in the mainland in Florida? Florida, USA, not Florida, the pueblo.
Can you read it again? Sorry.
Yeah, how do you distinguish between hurricane suffering in colonized Puerto Rico and in the mainland like Florida?
I've never covered Florida, so it's a bit hard for me to like put an opinion when I haven't been to a place. But let me think about this for a second. I don't think I can talk visually about it. I mean, in the sense of like photography, if this is what the person's asking. Just because I'm not that familiar with the visual language that comes out of Florida. Like I've seen it, I have some colleagues that work there, but it's not like in the top of my head. I don't feel like I can make a solid statement about that. But I do think, you know, that the coverage of stories in Puerto Rico turns different because everything, you know, the colonial relationship with the United States and all of what that entails always influences the stories that are told here. And you know, the lens through which we're viewed, not lens on photography wise, but on narrative wise. It's always there, on that ungovernability, right? Like, and we have a long way to go, but I think that always comes out in coverage of Puerto Rico, that I don't know if it's like reported the same, and if it was a state.
Yeah, this question makes me want to go back to see the coverage of Hurricane Harvey in Texas and Louisiana, which was 1 month before Maria. Now I need to revisit that. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. It's it's crazy that happened that in 2017. But yeah, it would be good to make a comparison, especially with Florida. Especially like the Puerto Ricans who moved to Florida, who moved after Hurricane Maria, and then Florida still gets a lot of bad hurricanes. Mm-hmm. I wonder what their perspective of that would be. So that's a good question.
Thank you for that question. Who made it? I can't read it, but thank you.
Yeah, and thinking of like the comparisons made with Hurricane Katrina, or like how they said like, oh, it's not like it's a Katrina, but it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was always played down, and it was always played down. I think also, I mean, like you can be factual and say that it was a Category 4 and it was not a Category 5 because it was missing 1 mile to reach Category 5. But, it's little things that sometimes, I don't even know how to say it. It's like show that, show like how sometimes things here just like run differently because of, where we are.
Yeah. And not to answer the question for you, but like in Hurricane Katrina, when it happened, I think something distinct about Puerto Rico is how trapped you feel on an island. You can't just like be driven to another state, which is what happened with Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. But at the same time, being like driven to another state for safety caused a lot of families to be separated during Hurricane Katrina. So I think in Puerto Rico, something distinct is how trapped you are in a little island and big waters. So.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also something that like this family separation here was a huge deal after the hurricane. There were multiple people that I photographed that, and I remember his picture is not here. An older man in Comerío who, let us go into his home, and we were talking, and he was sharing with us how depressed he was and how worried he was because his daughter had left because she had 2 kids and she had to leave because, how things were not really improving, but how much that was affecting him because now he was alone, and it was a lot harder for him. And that's something that I heard a lot, and I think it's also an issue of in Puerto Rico, how we have our population, it's aging, and most of our population, it's older, and that's gonna bring up a whole other issues and stories. But when it came to that, we lost a lot of people that a lot of a part of the population who moved to the United States because they felt it was the right decision for them in the middle of the chaos that was happening. But that also, it's like also we have to like to look at what's the effect here to some of the people that are the most vulnerable.
They had actually followed up on that question right after and added, maybe a better way to put this, is there a different visual approach to take of Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Guam, mainland reservations, and other subordinate areas? But again, since you haven't photographed outside, I don't know that changes here.
Can you read it again?
Yeah. Is there a different visual approach to take of Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Guam, mainland reservations, and other, quote, subordinate areas?
Yeah, definitely. That question is more clear to my brain. I think definitely because of multiple things. It's like mainly, I mean, for me, right, and one of the things that drives me, or like that pushes me is that all of our communities have not been documented by their people, right? Like it's always been an outside lens that has actually built and fed this stereotypical representation of a place where it's like the same images repeat. Doesn't matter if 20 years go by, they always have the woman cleaning clothes at the river and el lechon, you know, and the woman dancing bomba y Loisa. It just becomes like this stereotypical thing, right? And I'm only talking about Puerto Rico, but it happens in a lot of other communities. And I think, you know, now that we have easier access to photography and there's more opportunities for communities that were very underrepresented before, to, you know, take that power and say, no, I'm gonna take the pictures, you know, like we are going to tell the stories, and how to use the camera as, you know, it's a political tool, right? It's not just like, oh, let's go make pretty pictures, right? There's something that drives the work that I do, and that I know photographers, not just Puerto Ricans, but people from underrepresented communities and minorities, and though I don't like to use the word minorities, but use, because you wanna change the stories that are being told about our communities. So I do think that, yes, we need to approach it differently. And it's not to say that someone that it's not from a community cannot photograph it, but there's one thing, it's also like, if you're gonna go into someone else's community, you should try to uplift them. If there's no opportunities there, or if there's someone locally that is doing the work, but they're not that well known, I think that's like the responsibility that one has in one hand. And I think it's also, if you're an outsider, like you have the responsibility to educate yourself, to represent this the place that you're documenting in a sensible way, educated and sensible way.
We have a few more questions. Sorry to read this out of order, because it's just that one says, I love this photo that's posted now. What does it depict? It certainly looks like patriarchal government, but that was about 5 or 6 minutes ago, so I don't know if it was this photo or one that you had before. If the person's still on.
Oh, it's probably the
I think it was
one
before. Yeah.
Wait, let me do it. It's gonna be easier if I do this.
Yeah, whichever photo you had it open at 12:45 p.m.
Yeah, it was this one. It was this one.
That one, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What does it depict? Yeah. Looks like patriarchal.
So this was taken during after Ricardo Rosselló had said that he was gonna leave his post as governor, and they were debating if or trying to make a decision if Pedro Pierluisi could take power. And this is the PNP caucus trying to make a decision. So the PNP, Partido Nuevo Progresista. And I actually, this is not, like, these are not places that I like go into. This is actually the first time that I had been in there to make photos, just because like I don't cover much local politics. So it was like a new place for me. It was hard to shoot in there. The light was really tough, but I think it was, for me, it was just like so intriguing, you know, like there's one woman in there's actually two women in the picture, or three. All of them are to the left, but yes, these are the decision makers.
And this person also had a question. They said, your photos are gorgeous. Any thoughts about what it means to take beautiful photographs about traumatic events and circumstances? So beauty and trauma.
I think. I think there are very fine lines of exploitation and documentation, and it's really up to the person that's behind the lens to like question that for in one part. And I mean, I also think that, you know, we use photography to communicate, and we want people to look at the images. We want to make beautiful work because we want people to engage. And I mean, we hope that people can feel, even if it's through like a beautifully aesthetic image, even if it's like a very painful moment, or if it's through like a more rough, messier frame. I think this is a very long conversation to have. Like, I would love to have it with this person because it's like an eternal debate, that, I don't know, I just think they're fine lines. I think it really depends on the intention of the person that's behind the camera, and the effects that work ends up having, you know, to in the long run, or to the audience that's seeing it.
We have another question from another person. They say, "Brava, Erika. These are incredible documents. What's your assessment of the current state of journalism on the island? And are you covering the primary election crisis?"
I'm not covering it. I debate it, but I'm not covering it. Taking a little bit of a break, but watching it from, you know, very little distance, what's happening, and a bit dumbfounded. Yeah. And what was the first part of the question?
What's your assessment of the current state of journalism on the island? I think something that happened recently was that local journalists were denouncing how they give all the stories to mostly David Begnot, and how Begnot reported on the election crisis before any of the local journalists did. I don't know if you were involved in any of that, but I saw that happening.
I wasn't. I think that's just kind of, you know, that's decision making inside the government. That's not up to us. If you ask any local journalist, would be probably say that, you know, it's like people can spend months asking for interviews and not get them. Ask the Centro de Periodismo Investigativo, and they will tell you.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, to be honest. I mean, I think there's a lot of issues. I think we've lost a ton of journalists. We've lost a ton of photojournalists in the past 5 years. There is barely any staff people in the local publications. It's like a serious issue, and that also affects, you know, like how our stories are presented or not, or told. And also, you know, it's not up to the journalists. Many of the things that happen here, I good colleagues and friends who report locally, who work their life out trying to make the best work, but sometimes that's not possible, and it's not even up to them. But I, you know, like, journalism is a struggle. It's a like, reporting in Puerto Rico, it's not, I don't think it's an easy job, you know. And I'm very proud of all my colleagues in Puerto Rico, because they've helped me, and not just because of that, but because, you know, little by little we try to bring justice to what we can, and there's things that are not great about it. I'm not, you know, like, you can't deny that. I think one of the things that, and I actually like made some comments about this recently, how last weekend a woman was raped by 5 men, and 2 days later, not even the day after, the story was not in the cover of any of the local newspapers. And it's still not in the cover of the local newspapers. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's layers into decision making, and I do understand that, you know, the primaries and the debacle that we have with the democracy and the primaries, it's a huge issue, but that can't trump over other stories that also need to be told and that need to be investigated, because that's our job, to push for those things to happen too, you know, to bring truth to power. It's cliche, but it is, right? Like, if we don't do that, it's easier for like things to fall through the crack, and yeah, I don't know. It's a story that I'm following closely just because it's a horrendous thing that happened, and it's more shocking that it's not being talked about, and that the victim, it's being victimized 1,000 times through social media, and even the news and the headlines and the way it's been, in some of the places, how it's been reported on. So I don't know. I can complain about that story for the entire day. It's just,
yeah, the epidemic of machismo that isn't really covered a lot. Well, the people who are covering it are usually Puerto Rican women who are like struggling to get these stories out there. And this story that just happened last week of the 5 rapists in Añasco, which is actually my hometown, I saw people local, like my friends, were posting about it before I saw any news report. They were just like, we're hearing this thing going on, and there's barely any good reports out there now. They're very skewed, and yeah, but
there's also a lot of things that need to happen politically to deal with the violence against women, humongous problem that we have, that is not happening, you know, that most of the work, it's being done by nonprofits and activists. So there's still a long way to go.
And we're out of time now. We have only 2 comments, so I'll just read them to you so you know. Someone says, I'm from South Africa and don't get to meet many Puerto Ricans. Thanks for creating work that is representative of the people of Puerto Rico. And someone else says, excellent presentation and terrific work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and thank you, Erika from the MoCP for being a part of this and being a part of the show Temporal. Again, Temporal is up until September 19th by reservation in Chicago. So if anyone is interested in going in person and seeing Erika's works in person as well, and you're in Chicago, feel free to make a reservation and stopping by the Museum of Contemporary Photography. And someone's asking, is this recorded for viewing again? And I was just about to say that, actually. Yes, we are recording this, and we will post it on the museum's Vimeo page. And you can also find it if you go to MoCP and go to past events, because now this will be listed as a past event, and you just click on Erika P. Rodríguez Behind the Lens. It'll be on that page as well, linked there. So you can either click on the same event page and it'll show you the Vimeo embedded, or you can go to our MoCP, just Google MoCP Vimeo, and we have all the behind the lens presentations. There's a virtual tour of Temporal actually put up there now. So you can watch all of that on our Vimeo page. And more thank yous, like 3 people saying thank you, incredible presentation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for also, you know, like doing this show, right? Like bringing light into the Puerto Rican stories and to other Puerto Rican artists. You know, it's a bunch of us in it, so I wish I could be there, you know, if there wasn't a pandemic. I think a lot of us would have made it to Chicago.
Yeah, Erika was actually the first photographer I met with for the show. The first person I talked to. I think the first person that was included. So everything was kind of, every decision I made after curatorially was based on like the 2 hours that we spent having coffee at Don Pedro, was it?
No, and
Like,
Don Juan, Café Don Juan.
Don-
In Atorrey. It's true. I forgot about that.
yeah, it inspired like what you were talking about, the cotidianidad, daily life after the hurricane, and everything you said I wrote down and like took into account. So it's nice that you were able to present, because like just
Thank you.
fun
Thank
fact,
you.
she was the first person I
And-
met with.
Yeah, and Natalia, it's presenting next, right? Natalia Lasalle
Yes.
Murillo.
I almost
Awesome.
forgot. Yes,
Yeah.
next week, Natalia Lasalle Morillo, another artist in the show, who her work is La Ruta, a video installation, is presenting also about her work. So make sure to tune in next Friday at the same time for a Behind the Lens with Natalia Lasalle Morillo. So.
I just have to spread the love.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
day. Bye.